A respectable woman enters a doctor's office with a simple complaint of anxiety, only to be diagnosed with a dangerous illness called hysteria. In the prim and proper Victorian era, female health was a mystery often solved with shocking and brutal cures. This is the story of one such treatment, a medical procedure so invasive and controversial it redefined the line between healing and harm. By the end of this, you will understand the true darkness behind a doctor's supposed cure and how it shaped women's lives for generations. We will uncover why this was allowed to happen and what it reveals about power and medicine. What does it mean when your cure is worse than your sickness? That diagnosis of hysteria was far more than a simple medical term. It was a sprawling, all-encompassing cage built by the beliefs of an entire era. In the consulting rooms of Victorian doctors, hysteria became a convenient label for almost any symptom a woman presented that did not fit a narrow ideal of proper femininity. Anxiety was hysteria, irritability was a sure sign of it, even a lack of energy or an excess of it, fainting spells, sleeplessness, and what was termed inappropriate sexual desire, all of it was funneled into this single, devastating diagnosis. The root cause, according to ancient medical theories that persisted for centuries, was the womb itself. Doctors genuinely believed the uterus was an independent, almost animalistic organ that could detach and wander through a woman's body, causing chaos wherever it went. A headache meant the womb was pressing against the brain. Shortness of breath indicated it was lodged in the chest. This so-called wandering uterus was thought to be the source of all these mysterious female troubles, a concept that sounds like pure fantasy to us today but was established medical fact for generations. These beliefs were powerfully reinforced by the strict social norms of the time. A woman was expected to be passive, delicate, and emotionally subdued. Any deviation from this quiet ideal, any display of strong emotion or independent thought, was not seen as a natural human response, but as evidence of a broken biology. The medical establishment effectively pathologized being a woman, turning normal emotions and behaviors into symptoms of a disease. Historical medical texts are filled with elaborate illustrations of pale, languishing women in states of hysterical paroxysm, their postures and expressions designed to show a loss of control and reason. These images were not just clinical descriptions, they were powerful propaganda that painted women as inherently fragile, unstable, and in constant need of male medical supervision. The diagnosis was not merely incorrect, it was a tool that cemented a profound power imbalance, one that would soon pave the way for a cure more shocking than the illness itself. Into this world of diagnosis came the treatment, a procedure cloaked in clinical language but rooted in a profound violation. The primary cure for hysteria was manual pelvic massage, a therapy where a physician would use his fingers to manually stimulate a woman's genitals until she reached a state called hysterical paroxysm, which we now understand as an orgasm. This was not a hidden or fringe practice. It was a standard, accepted medical procedure performed in the sterile environment of a doctor's office. To preserve the decorum of the era, the woman was often fully clothed, lying on an examination table with a special modesty blanket draped over her lower body. This sheet, often with a strategic opening, allowed the doctor access while maintaining a visual fiction of separation, a physical representation of the era's deep denial. The medical reasoning was presented with cold, scientific detachment. Doctors believed the hysterical paroxysm released a dangerous buildup of what they called hysterical fluids, which were thought to be congested in the womb and throughout the body. This release was supposed to calm the overexcited nervous system and restore the patient to a state of placid femininity. Yet the reality for the woman on the table was one of extreme psychological and physical invasiveness. She had to lie perfectly still and silent, enduring an intensely intimate and sexualized act while being told it was a purely mechanical, therapeutic process. Any sound or sign of pleasure from her would have been a mark of deep shame, a betrayal of the very purity society demanded she uphold. The hypocrisy was staggering. This was a culture that prized female modesty above almost all else, that constructed elaborate rules to prevent even the slightest physical contact between unmarried men and women. Yet in the doctor's office, under the guise of science, these boundaries were systematically and professionally erased. The very men tasked with upholding a woman's moral virtue were the ones performing a procedure that today would be unambiguously classified as sexual assault. This cure was not a secret, but it was a profound contradiction, a sanctioned breach of the very social codes it was supposedly meant to protect. The repetitive nature of this so-called cure soon presented a practical problem for the physicians themselves. All that manual stimulation led to a common professional complaint: hand fatigue and repetitive strain injuries. Doctors found their fingers and wrists aching from the effort of inducing these therapeutic paroxysms in patient after patient. The solution arrived not from a rethink of the treatment's ethics, but from the age of invention. In the final decades of the 19th century, the medical world embraced a new technology, the electromechanical vibrator. This was not invented as a pleasure device, but as a legitimate, labor-saving medical instrument. The first models were large, intimidating machines, often powered by bulky electric or steam engines. They looked more like industrial tools than anything meant for a human body. One popular model was the Chattanooga vibrator, a fearsome contraption on a stand that directed powerful vibrations through a large, bulbous attachment. Another was the Macora vibrator, which promised to cure everything from constipation to hysteria with its relentless, jarring motions. These devices were advertised in serious medical journals, praised for their efficiency and their ability to deliver a reliable paroxysm in a fraction of the time. What had once taken a doctor up to an hour of manual effort could now be achieved in a matter of minutes. This innovation stripped the process of even its last pretense of personal care. The woman was no longer an individual to be treated, but a problem to be solved quickly. The machine turned the doctor from an active participant into a mere operator, further widening the emotional chasm between physician and patient. This was medicine moving towards an assembly line where the cure for a woman's deepest anxieties was reduced to a standardized, mechanical procedure. It is one of history's most jarring ironies that an object now commonly found in bedside tables began its life as a cold, clinical answer to a fabricated disease. How did we get from a doctor's exhausted hands to a buzzing machine in a home drawer? The story of this device's journey out of the clinic is the next strange twist in this dark history. But the endurance of this bizarre practice was never just about medicine. It was propped up by a powerful, three-legged stool of social control, professional authority, and cold, hard cash. The relationship between a Victorian doctor and his female patient was fundamentally one of absolute power and absolute powerlessness. He was the male expert, armed with scientific knowledge and social standing. She was conditioned to be submissive, to obey authority, and to trust without question. In this dynamic, her own feelings about the treatment were irrelevant, even dangerous to voice. To question the doctor was to question science itself and to risk being branded as even more hysterical, or worse, morally corrupt. This treatment was a physical manifestation of patriarchal control, a ritual that reinforced a woman's body was not her own to understand or govern, but a territory to be managed by male professionals. The financial incentive for doctors was immense. Hysteria was the perfect recurring revenue stream. A patient could not be cured of a disease that did not exist, so she would return week after week, month after month, for the same mechanical relief. These appointments were a steady, reliable source of income, making the treatment far too profitable to abandon on ethical grounds. This business model, however, was largely reserved for the wealthy. Affluent women could afford the ongoing fees for a private, if humiliating, therapy in a doctor's comfortable office. For a poor woman exhibiting the same so-called symptoms, the diagnosis was often far more severe. Instead of hysteria, she might be labeled as insane, morally degenerate, or suffering from nymphomania, leading not to a physician's office, but to the bleak, often permanent confinement of an asylum. The cure you received depended entirely on your bank account. At its core, This entire medical charade was about the management and exploitation of female sexuality. In a society that publicly denied women had any sexual feelings at all, doctors were systematically, clinically, and profitably orchestrating them. The very act that was considered a shameful loss of control in the marital bed was being professionally induced as a medical necessity in the clinic. This was a profound and systemic violation of the doctor's oath to do no harm. It transformed a fundamental aspect of human experience into a pathological symptom, and the healing profession into a mechanism of control. How could such an open secret possibly survive in an age of growing knowledge? The truth, as we are about to see, could only be suppressed for so long before the walls of denial came crashing down. So this is the legacy of Hysteria, a story that stretches from a wandering womb to a doctor's tired hands and finally to the cold hum of a machine. It was a diagnosis built on sand, a cage constructed from ancient superstition and rigid social control. The cure, whether by hand or by device, was never about healing, but about enforcing a quiet, convenient femininity through systematic and sanctioned violation. This chapter of medical history stands as a stark monument to misogyny, a time when the female body was not a subject of understanding, but an object to be managed, controlled, and profited from. It reminds us that science without ethics and empathy can easily become a tool of oppression, and that makes you wonder, what medical practices do we accept today that will leave future generations equally stunned and appalled? What current treatments will be seen not as progress, but as a profound failure of compassion? We would love to hear your thoughts on this dark history and your reflections on modern medicine, so please share your reactions in the comments below.